Hey, this is G again at Realize Live. I am here with Matt from Copia Automation.
I'm one of the co-founders at Copia. I run business development and partnerships. I would say, simply put, Copia, where we're trying to bring DevOps from the IT side to OT. And when I say DevOps, the easiest way I say it is we're just helping you manage your code base. How do you write, manage, and deploy your code base for industrial system? The long-term vision, obviously, is the end-to-end DevOps chain. How can we really help you develop your code, test your code, and deploy your code, and then thinking about how can integrate with providers such as Siemens, really increase the overall efficiency and output of the production base and bring the same gains and the evolution that we've had from the IT space, adapt it and see what's going on in the OT space and then figure out how we can make DevOps actually real for the industrial production base.
I mean, I'm coming from control systems integration. I do know what DevOps is, but I would say probably a lot of your conversations where they're traditional control systems engineers don't know what that really means.
Yeah.
I think you just said a few of those things, but what parts of that do you think are most important in the OT space versus what you would see in IT?
I always say I'm stupid and lazy, and so I will try to define everything for me, right? And so the biggest thing is, like, if you go on any website, DevOps is so complicated. Again, I always say, how do you write, manage, and deploy code, right? And for us, it's how do you write, manage, deploy code for robotics and industrial. So for us right now, when you say what's most important, the biggest thing is we're at a stage of the company where we build around our customers, we build around what users need. It's really getting, I always say, negative to zero. Do you know who's changing your code? Do you know who's writing your code? And then also, do you know what's happening to your machine? That is kind of the basis of what we need everyone to get at. And then after that, it's like, how do you do cool stuff on top of that, right? Like
Sure.
standards, deployment, testing, and all that. That's a longer term vision. Is how do you really start deploying and efficiently scale your organization. Right. So for now, I would say the most important thing right now is how do you get to negative to zero? It's, do you know what's on your machines, and do you know what your engineers or integrators are doing? 99% of the time, you ask any person, they go, I don't really know what's on the machine. I don't really know what's going on. And so the most important thing is, do you have a single source of truth? Do you have visibility and control over your industrial code base? And that's the most important. But I do want to reiterate, like, long term, it's not just about source control or version control. It's really thinking about how you're managing the entire stack of the code base.
Right. So if someone's not familiar with Copia, what pieces of that you just mentioned are part of the products that you offer and what customers are truly interested in?
So what we offer now is a Git-based source control solution for POC. So Git's been around for what, 25, 30 years. It's the reason why software engineering is what it is now. And it's the base root of all DevOps. So really it's, again, that collaboration piece. How are you really collaborating, writing code together? How are you making sure your quality of your code is very high? And again, how are you tracking what people are doing? So that's kind of our first product. We also have a backup solution, which we have an agent that goes and backs up code from the PLC. And then we go, hey, you told us that this is your source of truth. There's a difference between your repository and your machine. So the two products are automated backup, and we also have source control on top of it.
So how does the automated backup, how does that actually work when it's deployed in a real automation assembly line, whatever?
At the end of the day, I would say it's very simple. When you first started, we'd always say, this is just common sense. This is what everyone should be doing. We're not essentially kind of reinventing the wheel for OT. The backing up side really is we just have an agent that's just doing a simple upload for the machines. And then we're just essentially synchronizing it with what we have on the cloud. So we work with AWS and we put everything on the cloud. And essentially we're just going out and just doing simple uploads. So the root of it is very simple. We're just doing uploads, and instead of having a human doing your uploads, we're automating your uploads.
I think you might be underselling yourself a little bit.
I know. It's because we've been doing it for so long, is that I just truly believe that everyone needs to be doing this.
Right.
And other industries are already doing this. And I have sympathy for the fact that there is not much tooling for engineers doing this now in the OT space. And so when you think about a long-term vision, it is radical. It is awesome, and I'm very passionate about it. But at the end of the day, I do sometimes undersell it because I'm like, hey, we should all be doing this. This should not be something crazy. Like, this should be a foundation of what you're doing, right? So.
Well, I think that kind of off of that, though, there's probably reasons why in our technology stack that didn't exist, right? Like, if someone didn't invent it yet, there's probably some challenge as to why. So, what are some key challenges that you have overcome as in your product that, why you can do that versus like it didn't even exist before?
Yeah, and I would say we were the first movers. And I would tell you, being a first mover is terrifying. Because I always say either you're doing really good or it's a bad idea, right? Because if there's not enough space for you, so I would say there is enough space because everyone we've talked to has had this problem.
What did you solve to be able to do this in practice?
Yeah, and I would say the biggest challenge, I always say selling a product, it's not easy, but selling behavioral change is extremely difficult, right? And so the early challenges was when we started to be like, what's Git? What's a Git, right? And so the challenges are really is that there are a lot of companies that are used to the way things are done. They're used to the pain. And we go, we don't need that pain. And so a lot of the early challenges were, you don't need to have that pain. And, we've talked to people who their entire source code is on a USB stick, Velcroed onto the back of their cabinet, right? That really shouldn't be that way. And so a lot of the early challenges is essentially showing people the new way of doing things.
Right.
Showing people that you don't need to be facing these. And so that was the early challenges. And I would say right now, the industry really, there obviously are big buzzwords, 4.0, but the IT/OT convergence buzzword, really, I'm seeing it being realized.
Right.
Again, as a show.
I've only said that pun like 10 times during this.
But it is really being realized. I truly believe Copia is one of the front runners of making sure that there's tooling to make sure that IT/OT convergence is a reality, right? And so the challenges, again, are people, organizations not truly understanding it, or the other challenges, organizations that want to adopt it, but again, there's no tooling for it, right? And so obviously those are our best customers, the best users, and adapting IT tooling for those individuals.
Yeah.
So those are the two. Story long. But,
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking that like some of the reasons why is that USB stick taped to the machine, right? Like we have machines that are all very different and custom to what that end user is doing. They weren't connected,
Exactly.
over some communication, right? You couldn't actually go out and do it. It's an important point to say that like the digital transformation or Industry 4.0, the basis of it is that connectivity. And now it's not just getting data, it's interacting with the machines like what you're doing.
At the end of the day, the bottleneck is always code, right? And so at Copia, we are SOC 2 Type 2 compliant, which means that we spend a lot of money, a lot of resources to make sure that our processes in the back are super secure. We have traceability. We have everything end to end.
Just so you're not aware, the SOC 2 is a cybersecurity standard.
Yeah, privacy, security. It is the industry, the gold standard, right? And it's very hard to achieve. And I'm very proud of our company for achieving that. Really, at the end of the day, I say, you invested millions of dollars in the hardware. Why are we not investing more into making sure that the code that's running that hardware is, secure, it's safe, it has everything around it. For us, we viewed a lot of industrial systems bottlenecked around code. Again, I've talked to customers who are like, hey, I've deployed the wrong version of that code and I had another downtime event because they grabbed the wrong file, right? That USB stick was maybe not up to date, which is more often than not. And they just grabbed what they thought was the most recent version, deployed it, and then they have another event, right? And so for us, even like Candy Crush has insane kind of back-end infrastructure for code. For us, manufacturing and automation runs society. It's how we live. Why should we not have the same scrutiny of how we deploy code for what runs society? So that's really where it comes down to it. How are you managing that code layer and how are you running that? We believe that the code is just as equal, if not more equal than the code base, right, for the hardware.
The repository part of it, of being able to see what changed, I think is actually a better way, like going back to that behavioral part. I've heard stories of like where plant managers or whatever say like, okay, we're going to put passwords on everything, right? So that the maintenance staff can't change it, right? But the reality is the maintenance staff is like keeping it running. At least you have visibility or some type of notification that it changed and be able to review why.
People always ask me what industry or what customers do you have? We're really kind of split across the spectrum. We have SIs, we have machine builders, we have end users. The best customers that we have are really ones who leverage the true nature of Git, of how you're collaborating with all of your external partners, right? So if you think about an end user who wants to police or understand what's going on their factory floor, they bring their SIs on and they use Copia and they collaborate together, right? You don't need to do fly out and do all these crazy things. You can say, hey, here's my code. Here's what's going on before you come out, before you touch up our code, right? Really, the collaboration piece is not just, I say, not internal, but it's like external as well. Of how do you collaborate with third parties as well? We have customers like Amazon who really are thinking about how do I set standards? How do I set libraries? How do I manage my own team? But also, very importantly, how do I manage my OEM? How do I manage my SIs and what's going in and out? Again, that's why earlier I was trying to undersell it. Is that's a given. We should be knowing what's going on, and our whole thing is let's bring automation to that parity. Let's bring this kind of tooling to understand what's going on into your code base.
Is there anything that you've been working on lately that you think is exciting that you could share? Or...
Everything.
Okay.
I came from sales background. I love future selling. I'm the founder. That's dangerous, right? But I would say, again, we build around the customer. So the most exciting part right now is, again, getting people from that negative to zero, getting them there. The future, frankly, is just wide open, right? Because once we have that, what is the appetite of that automation team, that controls team, right? Could it be standards? Could it be libraries? Could it be testing? Could it be deployment? Right now, we're doing a lot of work to make sure that we have a breadth of vendors that we support. Our strategy right now is ensuring that our product is first class. What excites me the most is the fact that there's a lot of things that we can solve, right? And what excites me is that we have a team that's very focused, that is able to start thinking around the customer. And so for me, if I did future selling, it is really around the standardization of libraries, right? And the auditing of it, right? So you have now your code base, what is going on, we can tell that. So we are building products, we are innovating on, for example, can we audit your firmware? Are there vulnerabilities in your firmware? Are there vulnerabilities in your code, right? And so once we have all that layer, we can start iterating on that, right? And so again, I don't want to future tell too much, but the beginning is now, right? And the journey is just starting still. What really excites me is the potential of it. And so it's a long roundabout answer to say that I don't want to future sell.
Well, no, it's cool to be able to see that vision. I think like even things they've been talking about at this conference of like digital threads, right? Like you can start going all the way back to how that relates to other parts of the business. There's a lot of potential there, like you said. I'm excited to see where your company goes.
Yeah, no, I would say, for example, one reason Siemens is such a great partner is that they have that vision. They understand what's going on. And again, that digital thread of from end to end, what's been going on to that code end to end? How can you how can you understand what caused downtime, right? Now we have a lot, there's great companies, right? There's like going to be like a Highbyte, there's going to be collecting data, or, there's the OE, there's Ignition. But at the end of the day, I always say that is important, but how do you fundamentally know what caused an outage, right? How do you do that? And there's been no tooling. And Copia truly was the first one to say, hey, if you had a downtime event, if you had some kind of event, we can trace it back to code. And then the true long-term vision is, how do you then prevent that from happening? You don't want people to be reactive. You want people to be proactive to make sure that there are less downtime events. Again, we just we're coming out with an industry report soon. We're seeing that executives are saying that they have 31 hours to recover from downtime. And we're saying, we want to reduce that recovery, but really, we want to prevent that recovery.
Right.
And these executives are also saying that 50% of their downtime is attributed to code errors.
Yeah.
And so can we get that to 0%, right? How can we ensure that systems are running? Really, at the end of the day, it's 50% is code.
Well, thanks so much for sharing that. And I'm excited to see where things go. And thanks for talking with me today.
Oh, great. Thank you again.